the cherry on top of the cake was German Chancellor's trip to China on November the 4th with an impressive delegation of CEOs from 12 companies, including Volkswagen, Deutsche Bank, Siemens, BASF and Merck. It was the first visit by a G7 leader in almost 3 years. In an op-ed on Political, Scholz explained why he flew to China. Even in changed circumstances, he said, China remains an important business and trading partner for Germany and Europe. We don't want to decouple from it. It sounds refreshing, given that some devil-may-care Western politicians have been floating the idea of decoupling from China for quite some time. So I see Scholz's reassurances the voice of reason, courageously telling a simple home truth. The West needs China and vice versa. Germany is the fourth largest economy in the world, the largest in Europe. Since previous leader Angela Merkel, both sides have reaped tremendous benefits from their pragmatic approach. Here are just some undeniable facts. Over the past 5 decades, bilateral trade have grown by almost, guess, 1,000 times. Germany is one of China's biggest trading partners in the EU, and China has been Germany's top trading partner for 6 consecutive years. We share a lot of complementarity in high-tech manufacturing and heavy industries. And in the first 9 months of this year, foreign direct investment from Germany jumped by over 100%. Just look at the chemical giant BASF, whose CEO Martin Brudermueller was part of Scholz's delegation. The company made its highest ever sales of around 12 billion euros in Greater China last year. That's 40% up year on year. Brudermueller said BASF has benefited from China's policy of widening market access. And China signed an agreement during Scholz's visit to buy 140 Airbus aircraft. That's worth some $17 billion. And that is only the tip of the iceberg. But this one-day trip to Beijing was not just about big bucks. The conflict in Ukraine and the risk of a nuclear Armageddon was also discussed. Doesn't this message add extra significance to Scholz's trip? The German Chancellor must have thought long and hard before going to China. Germany is an ally of the United States, but Scholz has seen for himself the damage that has been caused by the zero-sum mentality in the West that really brought home to him the scale of the disaster. Germany is a manufacturing powerhouse that relies heavily on exports, so decoupling from China would be stupid, if not suicidal. Don't forget the EU, and Germany in particular, is engulfed in a perfect storm of inflation, energy shortages, with the risks of economic recession and social instability. So the ball is obviously on Scholz's court. Now, how exactly were these visits covered by the media? Why some commentators reacted to the sight of Western leaders engaging Beijing like a bull to red rag? Well, it's a rhetorical question, isn't it? These media are more often than not looking at the story from a perspective of a zero-sum mentality. You are either with us or against us. If you cozy up to China, it's because you have an ulterior motive or a hidden agenda, right? Thorsten Benner, co-founder and director of the Global Public Policy Institute in Berlin, has no qualms about saying that Scholz has a China problem in an article published by Foreign Policy. It reads, Germany's Chancellor has insisted on an investment deal with China in contradiction to his own government strategy. Benner was referring to a deal late October, a week before Scholz's China trip. Scholz gave the green light to China Ocean Shipping Company to buy a stake in a terminal at Germany's main port of Hamburg. The port was lagging behind compared to other European counterparts, which has implications for the city and beyond. When Costco comes with the money and the confidence to turn things around, what's not to like? Plus, it was a 24.9% stake. Is that a problem? Given the experience of how Chinese investment transformed the Piraeus port in Greece, I would say China is part of the solution. More ironically, Benner refers to the catastrophic failure of Germany's Russia policy to warn against closer economic ties with China. He says a tectonic shift is underway in Germany, breaking with former German Chancellor Angela Merkel's approach of betting on ever closer economic relations with Beijing. The catastrophic failure of Germany's Russia policy has accelerated this shift, and there is now an emerging consensus that Germany needs to reduce its dependency on China. For me, the whole idea of dependency is a pretense. We ultimately depend on each other for survival and prosperity. To engage with China, an economic powerhouse, is not dependency, but sheer common sense. The real tectonic shift, many would also argue, is that more countries are seeing how unreliable the US has become. According to Benner's logic, if Germany were to reduce its dependency on China, whom should it turn to? The United States? Isn't the US creating a problem by selling oil at a higher price? Hasn't the euro lost considerable ground on a stronger dollar since the beginning of this year? Aren't European businesses relocating to the United States as a result of all these? Who is really the problem here? Yes, apparently, even CNN recognizes that Germany needs China. In a recent report, CNN declares Germany's leader and top CEOs have arrived in Beijing. They need China more than ever. It says Germany is hardly in a position to rock the boat with Beijing as it grapples with the challenge of reviving its struggling economy. Its consumers and companies have borne the brunt of Europe's energy crisis, and a deep recession is looming. Well, that's stating the obvious. Germany, just like other EU states, cannot do without China, and the reverse is true. Fact 1. Decoupling would be pointless and harmful. Fact 2. Scholz and the overwhelming majority of leaders are perfectly aware of that. The CNN report goes on. If the European Union and Germany were to decouple from China, it would lead to large GDP losses from the German economy, says an economist. I would take the question a step further. If the US were to decouple from China, what would happen to its GDP and to the world as a whole? Does the US not need China? A personal message to CNN, do a piece on that. My last sample. An article from the Lowy Institute, which compares a country's convening power to a sport. The title goes, if leadership diplomacy was an Olympic sport, Beijing beats Washington to the gold medal. True, China has devoted significant attention to boosting its international convening power. It achieves this, however, through development opportunities and by setting examples. Read my lips. The key word here is cooperation, cooperation, cooperation. And delivering concrete benefits through cooperation is too serious to be considered a sport. The lives of literally billions of people are at stake in the developing world. China is not playing us against them in a zero-sum game, contrary to what the title may suggest. The article acknowledges that Beijing's engagement with the developing world is a key element of its response to Joe Biden's attempt to build economic blocs, supply chains, and other multilateral groupings that contest Chinese influence. If world leaders willingly make the trip to China, isn't it because the world has had enough of US hegemony, Cold War mentality, and bullying tactics? It worked in the past, but a word to the wise, this line of reasoning will get you nowhere nowadays. After looking at these articles, one thing comes to my mind. They conjure up images of Shakespeare's green-eyed monster in the play Othello. He was, of course, referring to jealousy and fear of losing out. As China opens up its market further and engages ever more closely with the world, this green-eyed monster appears to eat away at the global West. How long will it take before everybody genuinely joins in to build a community of shared future?